So here we go again. The top story this week, WWE banning third-party stuff when it comes to their talent. We talked about this a number of weeks ago. There was still a lot of confusion about it. I gave you my thoughts on that whole situation, what Vince McMahon was trying to do, and there was a little bit of clarification that came out of it. I think there were a lot of wrestlers who were just very unsure about exactly what the company was trying to do. And this bubbled back up this week because when that all happened, if you remember, the deadline was set. It was a deadline of October 2nd, which came and went this past Friday. October 2nd was the deadline that WWE and Vince McMahon had set for all of their talent to sever any and all third-party business relationships that they may have had. Any kind of endorsement deals, any kind of monetary relationship that they may have with services like Cameo and Twitch had to be severed by October 2nd. Or they would risk penalty in some way, fine, suspension, possibly even termination. Which I laugh at. They're not terminating anybody. But anyone who is using their WWE name and likeness to make money, where WWE itself was not making any money off those deals, that's what they wanted to cut off. And let me be clear. If somebody is and I said this before, and I'm going to say it again. If somebody is using their WWE name on Twitch, they built an entire channel using their WWE name on Twitch, on Cameo, and there were wrestlers, and I named who they were on Cameo, for example. They were not under their real names. They were on there as a WWE superstar, blank, whoever it was. So that was going on. Then WWE has the right to either ask them or tell them that, look, you got to share in that revenue, or ask them to just stop doing that. That's fair enough. But according to a news story from Wrestling Inc., which has now been backed up by other sites like Fightful and PW Insider and The Observer, they may be taking things even farther. Vince McMahon sent an email to talent. The WWE is going to be taking control of all Twitch and Cameo accounts in 4 weeks. Once they have the logins, everyone's username, everyone's password, they're supposed to turn all that information over to the company. Once they have that, and once WWE takes control of these accounts, the talent can continue to use them, and WWE will give those individuals a percentage of the revenue generated from those accounts, which, and this is a big point, big bone of contention here, this is what has a lot of the talent up in arms, which will count against their downside guarantee. Which begs the question, as I'm sure some people are wondering, what is a downside guarantee? You've heard that before, you've heard that expression, so-and-so signed their downside is this, their downside is that. What does that mean? Every wrestler has a downside guarantee that they sign for in WWE. For the lower card wrestlers, their downside is not going to be that much. I don't know what they are today. But, it's come out years ago, not even that long ago, but years ago. It could be something for a lower card guy like maybe $75,000 per year, maybe even $100,000, maybe somewhere in that $75,000 to $125,000 range, right? Somewhere in there. For someone higher on the card, their downside is going to obviously be higher, into the low six figures, maybe the mid six figures. And the very top stars, it could be close to, if not $1 million or more. That means that that person will not make less than that figure for the year. They're guaranteed to make at least that much money. That does not count any additional money. Let's say business is good. It's a good year, right? A non-pandemic year, although WWE is making more money this year in the middle of a pandemic than they ever have in their history. But let's say you're in the middle of a good year, right? Business is booming. So you get extra money from the live events, right? Live event payoffs, from merchandise. If you're in the video game, that could be very lucrative. So if you have a downside guarantee, let's just say it's $250,000 a year. Your downside guarantee is pretty good. It's $250,000 a year. I'd say that's pretty good. And let's say you don't get hurt. You work all year. It's a good year. The buildings are full. You made it into the video game. Maybe you even had a t-shirt that sold really well that year. So you actually made $500,000. And then you had yourself a pretty good year because you made $500,000 that year. But if business was down, maybe you were hurt for a while, you weren't working the live events, and you didn't reach your downside. Get to the end of the year, and you didn't hit your downside. And your downside was $150,000. You only made $100,000 that year. WWE would then have to cut you a check for the other $50,000 at the end of the year to make up for what you're owed. So that's my understanding of how it works, how it still works in WWE. The numbers may be different, but that, generally speaking, is how a downside guarantee would work. So, what's the problem here? PW Insider spoke with a ton of different talents in the company. So did Fightful. But there was a report specifically from Mike Johnson on PW Insider. He spoke to a ton of different talent under the condition of anonymity. Nobody wanted to be named publicly. Who claimed that they were told a month ago, and this all first bubbled up. They were told a month ago, and they were under the impression that if they maintained a presence on these different services, like Twitch, not using their WWE name and likeness, if it was their own personal channel, their own brand, their own name, that they would not be affected by this. And from the sounds of that, that is no longer the case. It sounds like WWE plans to take control of their accounts regardless of whether or not they're using their WWE name. Now, WWE needs to clarify this ASAP, because it could just be another misunderstanding, and they're being just very overly vague with these email messages, and the talent is confused. They immediately think the worst, they're panicking, this is ridiculous, this doesn't make any sense. But it sounds like more than just a few. This is the impression that they're under, is that it applies to their account even if they have stripped it of any and all mentions of WWE. The fact that they're only going to get a cut on a certain percentage of those earnings now is also very frustrating. You know, you figure Twitch takes, I don't know what Twitch takes actually. Let's say Twitch takes 50%, right? Or whatever it may be. I mean, I know, for example, all these services work differently. But for example, you know, I do a lot of live streaming on YouTube. YouTube introduced Super Chats some time ago, which was a game changer for a lot of streamers because now people were, and now they have memberships and things like that on YouTube, but it was a game changer because if you were somebody who streamed a lot, you know, it's no different than on Twitch and other services. You get tips and bits and all that kind of stuff. But Google has the system set up where when you get Super Chats, the content creator nets 70% and YouTube takes 30%, which is a sizable percentage. But, you know, at least they're not taking 50. But yeah, if I'm doing a stream and I do, you know, reasonably well in a given night, you know, let's say $300 on a big pay-per-view stream in Super Chats, I ain't getting $300 because Google's taking their 30%. Right? Everybody has different percentages. Let's just say Twitch is taking 50%. Then WWE now is going to take its cut, and they'll decide how much the talent then gets. We don't know what that percentage is. It could be 5%, it could be 10%, it could be 15%. We don't know. If Zelina Vega had it, and she does have a Twitch, but if Zelina Vega had a Twitch under that name, look, that would be one thing. But if she has one under Thea Trinidad, and it has nothing to do with her WWE persona, yes, people would recognize her from WWE television. Yes, there would be an inherent benefit for her if people said, hey, that's Zelina Vega from WWE. And they wanted to come into her stream, and all they wanted to do was ask her WWE questions and talk about WWE. But look, if she's running it under her real name, and she's playing games, and she's doing non-WWE things, you know what? WWE can piss off. That's ridiculous. Not only that, but as WWE now wants to start to partner with or expand its own presence on Twitch, which is really what this is about. They want to get in on the whole Twitch thing. Right? They want to partner up and buddy up with Twitch and have everybody and everything go through them. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find new ways to make money off of these people because they're a company that tours. Like Icecapades, right? They're a touring brand that is unable to tour. And there's no indication of when they'll be able to go back to touring. And even when they do, they're not going to be touring as much. That seems pretty obvious. They were already scaling back on a lot of their live events even before the pandemic hit. So here you have this publicly traded company that is very cash rich and still doing very well financially at the moment. But they're looking for new ways. Hey, who can we make money off of? How can we bring in new sources of revenue? Hey, look at all these people. Look at all the money they're making. Look at all the money Paige is bringing in every single month on Twitch. How can we get our cut? We got these people under contract. How can we squeeze them so we can get more money out of this? That's what they're trying to do. But then there's this from the PW Insider report. It says the one connecting frustration across all talents who are upset is the realization that they will soon be required to stream and appear on Twitch as part of their WWE booking contracts. All of the talents told a very similar story, which is that instead of letting WWE take them over, they will still be booked to appear and stream as part of WWE's planned larger-scale Twitch presence going forward. Talent appearances will be just another appearance for the company, no different from a match on a house show or an autograph signing, and would not result in an extra payday. Instead, those Twitch appearances will morph into another requirement of the talent's booking contracts as part of their downside guarantee. So whatever sense of freedom they felt by having their own channel, that is now being completely taken away from them. And they are no longer making any extra money because it counts against their downside, in which case, why the hell even bother to maintain a channel anymore at all? But even if, it sounds like even if they give up their channel, there's still going to be a requirement for them to stream. It's like they have to do it now no matter what. It's now part of the job description all of a sudden. It wasn't when they signed that contract. You signed a WWE contract 2-3 years ago. There was no provision in there. There was no requirement for streaming on YouTube or streaming on Twitch. All of a sudden, the company wants to change that. They want to insert that. They want to make it part of your everyday responsibilities. But they ain't going to pay you anything for it. They're not going to pay you anything extra for it. Or if you do get a little bit of the percentage that, they're going to cut you in on, I'm sure it's going to be a sliver. It's not going to be that much. But yeah, why even bother having a channel anymore? If you are somebody who does it if you're a wrestler who does it for the extra income, if that is your main reason for going on Twitch, you want to make some extra money on the side, it's like your side hustle, then you're no longer going to get that extra income, or at least not nearly as much to make it worth your while. And if you're somebody who doesn't really do it for the money, you just do it because it was fun and you can sort of just lounge out and be yourself, well, now it's not so fun anymore. Because now it's work. They effectively want you to do more work for the same amount of pay. Yeah, I can understand why they would be upset about that. Now, if you remember Andrew Yang, his name came up. He took a great interest in this story a few weeks ago because he is a wrestling fan. He did run for president. He is talking about how in the next administration he may have some influence. He may even have a position. If I'm WWE, I got my eyes and ears open and I'm paying attention to this whole thing. So he's been very vocal about this. And he heard this news, and he's heard from a lot of wrestlers who have reached out to him, apparently. This is what he tweeted. He said, "This would be infuriating to me if I had spent time building up my social media channels only to have WWE take them over from their independent, quote-unquote, independent contractors. People are angry, and rightfully so. Hearing from talent that WWE is forcing performers to sign new contracts that include Twitch. Streaming on Twitch will become a work obligation, and if talent does not stream, they will forego earnings, be suspended, or face penalties. Does not sound like independent contractors." Yang also spoke to Wrestling Inc. and said this. He said, "A lot of it is that wrestlers are afraid to speak out. I've had wrestlers past and present reach out to me and say that Vince McMahon has been getting away with exploitation of wrestlers, calling themselves independent contractors while controlling their activities for years and years." Which, of course, we already knew that. He said a lot of it is just that they have a quasi-monopoly, and wrestlers fear that if they do try to unionize or organize in some way that Vince doesn't like, that they will never work there again. To me, though, this right here was the key line at the very end of the story. This was the key line of the entire thing. It says, they also noted that a lot of talent is livid, but as is usually the case in these situations, nobody would speak up about it. And therein lies the problem. This is exactly what I said the last time we talked about this. Somebody has to be willing to stand up and put their name on this publicly, and not just speak anonymously to wrestling news websites and politicians like Andrew Yang. The only way that any of this possibly changes is if you get half a dozen or more wrestlers, including some prominent names, maybe not even the biggest name, but some prominent names on that WWE roster, the Raw roster, the SmackDown roster, to stand up to Vince McMahon and say, look, you're overstepping your bounds here. Now you're taking this too far. We're not doing this. We're not signing on for this. He's not going to fire half of his roster. I mean, first of all, it'll be a PR disaster. But he's not going to fire half of his roster. I know he's got more talent now than he's ever had under contract at any one moment, but you can't just dump, all these people and just plug a whole new bunch of bodies in and expect people not to notice. That's not how this works. You've invested a lot of television time in a lot of these people for months, for years in some cases. They're not just going to fire all of those people if all of a sudden they speak up publicly. It's all about strength in numbers. It always is. Strength in numbers. But they don't have the guts to do it. And look, I wouldn't want to be the only person who raises their hand at that meeting either. I would like to know that if I'm going to stand up and raise my hand, that I've got some other people willing to back me up on this. But unless the talent revolts against it, nothing is ever going to change. First of all, if they're putting new contracts in front of talent and saying, hey, sign here. And we've heard, my God, we've heard tons of stories. I've heard stories and read stories going back to the early to mid 80s. The Wendy Richter story, when Wendy Richter was the women's champion before the whole Spider Lady incident, the first screw job, when they took the title away from her, they had Moolah in the Spider Lady costume screw Wendy Richter out of the women's title, and that was the end of Wendy Richter in WWE. The story where she was about to go out, it might have been that night, for her match, and Gorilla Monsoon is waiting at the gorilla position. Here, sign this, we got a new contract for you. Didn't give her a chance to read it or anything, and I think she refused to sign it. And then came the screw job, if I'm remembering that story correctly. So there's always been stories about people, hey, here, sign this. They don't want you to have time to look it over, and the last thing they want you to do is say, hey, I'm going to have my lawyer look it over. You dare say the word lawyer in front of Vince McMahon, you're dead to him. He is notorious for hating lawyers. He's got one of the best legal teams in the world. Oh yeah, I'm sure his lawyers are great. He loves those lawyers. He loves Jerry McDevitt. He loves all those lawyers. But he's notorious for that. Stories where wrestlers wanted to bring their lawyer to their contract negotiation. He hates that. Hates that. He would rather just deal with the performer one-on-one. Of course he would. Of course he would. Of course he doesn't want a lawyer in the room with him. But if they're putting contracts in front of the talent saying, here, sign here. It's the same contract, but it's got a few extra clauses in there covering Twitch and Cameo and other services. We need you to sign this. And guess what? Don't sign it. If your Twitch is that important to you, or your freedom is that important to you, or you're naive enough to believe that, oh, well, I'm an independent contractor. If you really believe that, then regardless of how, much money you may be making, and maybe you're doing well, maybe you're making a lot of money, maybe you don't need Twitch, but it just bothers you that they're doing this, just say no. It's very simple. Just say no. That's number one. Number two, WWE is really opening itself up to problems here if they keep barking up this tree. Protecting their intellectual property is one thing. You can't be Rusev on Twitch and make money. You can't be Paige on Twitch anymore and make money without WWE getting a cut. Fine. Then he'll be Miro and she'll be Saraya. They should not have any right to tell people that even under their real names, the name on their I don't give a shit what the language in the contract is. I'm just talking about this in terms of just basic fairness and common sense. Yes, it is possible there is language in the contracts that they signed that actually does allow WWE to do this. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it right. They should not have any right to tell people that even under their real names, the names on their driver's license, we want you to turn your account over to us. Give us your password. Give us your login. It's just wrong. And I want to see these people stand up for themselves. If it matters that much to them, if they're that, what was the word in the report there? Livid. A lot of the talent is livid. Oh, really? Well, if they're that livid, then they need to take a stand and say no more. Otherwise, you get what you deserve. The next time you sign your name on that piece of paper, you do so with the understanding that you are signing your life away. Unless you're an NXT talent, of course, throwing a fucking party in the middle of a pandemic, in which case when you ask Triple H, as somebody did on the conference call before Takeover this week, are there going to be any penalties for the people who threw the party? He'll tell you, well, gee, there's nothing we can do. We can't police people and control what they do in their personal lives. When it suits their agenda, they don't seem to have any problem telling people what to do in their personal lives. Throw a fucking party, though, and I guess, well, gee, there's nothing we can do about that. We can't tell them what to do. I guess that's where they draw the line. They need to put out a clarification about this first thing tomorrow morning. First thing Monday morning. Not for me. I don't work for the company. Not for me. Not for you. Not for the fans. But for their own talent. I almost said employees. I can't even use that word. But they need to, first thing Monday morning, put out that's what they did last time. I don't even think they waited. I think on Sunday. They had to put some kind of statement out. They need to issue an immediate clarification about what the policy is, because there are a lot of people who just sound very confused. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're misunderstanding and misinterpreting this entire thing. If the talent have it all wrong, and this is not what WWE is doing, then Vince McMahon personally, this is not enough to just put a statement out from the PR department. Vince McMahon himself, now I know he's been apparently getting to the buildings really late. Very cavalierly, he's coming to Raw late. This week, they didn't even sit down to start writing the fucking show on Monday until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. People apparently had no idea what they were doing on the show that night. They were at the building, but they didn't know what they were doing because the show wasn't even written yet. Until Vince came in, he sat down with everybody, and apparently at 2 p.m., hey, let's put together Monday Night Raw for 8 o'clock tonight. So I don't know when he's going to get to the building, but here's what he needs to do. He's the face of the company. He's the owner, he's the chairman, he's the CEO, he's the head cheese. Vince McMahon has to personally sit them down in the back tomorrow night at the Thunderdome, and again on Friday with the other roster. Or, maybe he could even wait until he gets them all together. We got a draft coming up this week. They may have the rosters together anyway. And very clearly explain to everybody what the actual policy is, and then take questions. Take Q&A. If there is a lesson to be learned this week, it is that you have to be transparent with people. Because otherwise, you're going to have a million different stories going around. Some of it true, some of it not true. And then you're going to be left to clean up the mess. But if this turns out to be accurate, as I'm reading this, and as Andrew Yang says that he's got WWE talent telling him, if this all turns out to be exactly what we think it is, Vince McMahon had better tread lightly. All he's doing is poking the bear. And if he keeps pushing on this, it's going to blow up in his face.